So I've been thinking about music at car shows, and the reason is I've been attending a lot of car shows. You may have noticed on some of my other posts that I'm working on my father's 65 Mustang with some friends of mine, and so I've had a renewed interest in checking out cars and things. So I've gone to some shows during the week. They're like Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or whatever at places like McDonald's or Hardee's, just, little shows. They've all got something in common. They all focus heavily on 50s music. Like, primarily, that's all they play. One place actually has an Elvis guy come in and just do Elvis karaoke throughout the whole show. The other show is playing a lot of doo-wop and things like that. And I think the argument there is, okay, we're trying to kind of recreate American graffiti a little bit because there's some 50s cars here. I've talked to other DJs who say, look, I look at the cars, I think about what year the car is, and I play a song from that year. And you can do that. That's kind of a fun thing to do. But having said that, let's say somebody shows up in a 1935 Ford. Are you going to play a song from the 30s? If they show up in a Model A from the 20s, are you going to play some Cole Porter music? Probably not. Other DJs feel like, no, that's not the way to go. What you should do is play music about cars. So Gary Newman's Cars, or Freeway of Love by Aretha Franklin, or, I don't know, Hot Rod Hearts by Robbie Dupree. Nobody said that except me. I think that's a fun one. You can go on and on like that. Keep on Truckin', or whatever, You could go that route too, and that's a fun route to go. But what I think is happening with a lot of car show DJs is they're completely missing their core audience, which is the people of hot rod culture who are actually attending these shows. And I'll explain. See, my dad bought a brand new 1956 Chevy Bel Air convertible. And if he were to go to a car show and see a 1956, he would probably be pretty nostalgic about hearing Rock Around the Clock. However, my dad is no longer with us. Most of the people at these car shows are not in their 80s and 90s. Most of them, they're in their 50s or their 60s. There are some people my age, but primarily the car nuts are the baby boomers in their 50s and 60s. So, maybe the 1955 Chevy that somebody bought in 1955 isn't at the show, but the guy who paid a couple $100 for that car in 1977 when he was 15 or 16 years old and fixed it up, was he listening to doo-wop because the car was from 1955? No. He was listening to Van Halen and Led Zeppelin and Peter Frampton and Ted Nugent. And I know this because the guy I'm talking about is my brother. This is him in his 55 and about 78. And I'm pretty sure he was cranking up some Skynyrd while he was doing that Burnout. That's who's at the show. That's who's being nostalgic about this stuff. Should play to them, And it's not just the rockers and the gearheads from the 70s and the 80s. Think about the Latinos who were doing the lowrider stuff. They're at these shows too. What were they listening to? No, they weren't listening to War Lowrider over and over again on the loop. Or Oyo Como Va. Although they probably were, but like Mauro Luna, one of our friends who's a DJ and a lowrider from the 60s and 70s, was listening to the Steely Dan Can't Buy a Thrill album. Do It Again, Dirty Work, Jackson 5, R&B, Top 40, Eagles, all kinds of stuff. So I play to that audience too, Anybody who was driving a car back in the 70s and 80s, anybody who's at the show, I want to be nostalgic for them and their culture, not necessarily when the car was new. In America, we've got a car culture. And a big part of the old cars, 50s and 60s muscle cars, is the hot rod culture of the 70s and 80s. And the people who bought these cars for a few $100 and wrecked them or sold them for a little bit of nothing and got their family car when they got married are nostalgic about these cars. That's why they go to these shows. So we should play for them, I think. This is the formula I try to use when I do car shows. And I get a lot of unsolicited compliments because people come up to me and say, I love what you're playing. It reminds me of when I had a car like this, or when my boyfriend had a car like this, or whatever. Every other show I go to, all that music only reminds me of the last show I went to before that. I don't have any nostalgia about Buddy Holly because I'm not that old. Do you see what I'm saying? So, I don't know. That might be a nice direction to go. I know when the Mustang is done, by the way, next summer, my plan is to put Maui 5 Goes in the trunk with a tablet and go to car shows. And if they don't have a DJ there, I'm just going to start playing or, get a gig at these shows. I think that would be fun. I could attend all these shows and, maybe make a couple bucks on the side. Just some ideas. Whatever you do is fine. I'm just making some suggestions here. Every show is different. I know that. But for the most part, these type of shows that I'm going to, where it's just kind of a classic car thing, which are cars 20 years and older in Wisconsin, maybe the 50s music isn't always appropriate. Sometimes I see brand new cars at these shows, like brand new Corvettes or Challengers or things like that. People are just showing off their new rod, and they get attention for it, like a new Hellcat or something. So it's not all about 50s cars, and the people at these shows definitely are primarily not people who are really going to be nostalgic about the 1950s music. It's going to be stuff from a little later, I think. So just some ideas. That's it. We'll see you next time. Practice and enjoy.